It's my pleasure to now introduce the next session, which is about good practice and inspections. And again, we will keep the time for questions and so rather short presentation and questions. We will go from not just good practice of manufacturing, but also good clinical practice, and I assume also good pharmacovigilance practice for inspections. So you will have the full life cycle and the compliance with our requirements. So the session is moderated by Anabela. Anabela, I'll leave you the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anabela Marçal. I'm the head of Committees and Inspection Department at the MEA. So as Agnes just said, this session is dedicated to Gxp Standards and Inspections. So under the department, we have GMP, GCP, GLP, and pharmacovigilance. So we'll try to cover all of them in this presentation. Of course, because you have different backgrounds and different, so we try to put it eye level, just to make sure. But if then you'll have any questions, we'll be happy to answer. But also, we will have our contacts, and if you have many other detailed questions, you can always come back to us in writing. Just by curiosity, because I looked at the list of participants, and it will be just interesting for us to know, is there any inspector in the room? No, okay. So, yeah, oh, okay. And are you GMP, GCP, pharmacovigilance inspector? Which one? The three, you do, okay, good. Yes. And how many of you have been directly involved in an inspection? I suppose mainly in a clinical trial inspection from what I saw from the... Okay. No, that's good then. I think we can have a fruitful discussion at the end. So I'll try to make the best use of the time and to have time for the questions. So we'll start with the GMP and supervision of manufacturers. And we have Elaine Donovan that will present us on that. She works in the manufacturing and quality compliance here at the MEA. So Elaine. Thank you.
So thank you very much for that lovely introduction, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you today. So today I've been given the task of speaking about GMP supervision of medicines manufacturers in the European Union. So as you may be aware, this is quite a far-reaching topic, but I hope today that I can give a broad overview of the key aspects, and hopefully we can all learn something and have an interesting discussion maybe at the end. So you're probably wondering as well, maybe why is this a topic for an international awareness session? But as you know, the pharmaceutical industry is a global one. And at the moment, we have a very global supply chain. And of about 85% of medicinal products that are sold in the EU, about 85% of these have at least one step or more of the manufacturing process performed outside the European Union. So it is really important to collaborate with international regulators to ensure that we can protect patient safety. So just to give a very broad overview at the beginning, some of the key principles, of course, for any medicine are safety, quality, and efficacy. And what keeps us here in the middle of all of these in this Venn diagram is GMP, or good manufacturing practice. So this is what ensures that the product is made in accordance with the marketing authorization, and also ensures that the product is of appropriate safety, efficacy, and quality for our patients. So now, just to go into a few more details. So any medicine manufacturer, no matter where it is located, must comply with GMP if the products are manufactured there are supplied to the EU. And in addition to this, any of the manufacturers located in the EU must comply with GMP, no matter where they are supplying their medicines to. So this applies for a number of products, so medicines for human use, medicines for veterinary use, and of course both of their active substances, and also applies to investigational medicinal products, so those used in clinical trials. So on the right-hand side here of my slide, you can see just a summary of GMP inspections performed by EU inspectorates over the last number of years. So as you can see, there's quite a high intensity of inspections in the EU. and outside the EU. So in the blue column, you can see the inspections performed in EEA countries by EU inspectorates. That's about 90% of inspections carried out overall. Non-EEA countries then make up about 10% of inspections, as a smaller number. And then in the green column, you can hopefully almost miss it. This is the total number of non-compliant sites. So I hope it's quite reassuring to see that there's quite a small number of sites that are found to be non-compliant with GMP. So as such, we can ensure to protect patient safety. So now, just to go into some more of the details, in the EU, we have a single system throughout all EU member states, and this is based on two main pillars. So the first one is the authorization or registration of operators in the supply chain. So an operator needs a license in order to produce and to work. And the second thing is that these operators are inspected to ensure that they comply with all legal requirements, compliance with GMP, any requirements, the marketing authorization, or the clinical trial application as applicable. And basically the key fountain or the key cornerstone for this is the formal recognition of each other's inspections. And this is set down in EU law. So each member state recognises all inspections carried out by any other member state. And how do these EU member states work together? So this harmonisation is achieved through a number of things. So we have the same legislation, the same GMP guide, which is Usual X Volume 4. There's the same quality manual for inspectorates, and these procedures are outlined in the compilation of union procedures. Then we also have a common forum. So this is where the GMDP Inspectors Working Group comes in. This is a group of really senior inspectors from across the EEA, and they meet here at the EMA a number of times a year, and they discuss common issues, develop guidance, harmonisation and implementation of guidance as well. And then this leads into the joint audit programme. So this is where inspectorates perform internal audits of other inspectorates. So two inspectorates will go to another national competent authority and inspect their inspectorate and their processes and procedures and ensure that they comply with the legislation and any other guidances and requirements. So now this is a very busy slide, I'm sure you can see. So I just wanted to highlight in the interest of time that we have a large number of directives and regulations that cover this area. And in addition, we're also always developing this. And there's two new guidelines that came out. They were published at the end of last year. So these are GMP guidelines for ATMPs and GMP guidelines for investigational medicinal products as well. This is an area that's constantly developing. So now you're probably wondering, what exactly do these manufacturers and importers of finished drug products, what do they have to comply with? So in the EU, they need to be authorised to carry out their activities. So this is by a manufacturing and importation authorisation, and this is granted by the national competent authority in that country after inspection. And this also applies to IMP manufacturers. And all of these manufacturers and importers are regularly inspected by an EU authority, unless a mutual recognition agreement is in place. And I'll speak a bit more about these later. So this is irrespective of the site is inside or outside of the EU, and the frequency of inspection is based on risk. So depending on risk, the frequency of inspection can be increased or decreased. So just to go on to active substance manufacturers and importers, these need to be registered with the national competent authority of the member state where they are located, and this also applies to IMP manufacturers. And these manufacturers are inspected in case of non-compliance, but generally the responsibility for active substance manufactured according to GMP is with the manufacturing authorization holder. So this can be the finished product manufacturer or the importer. So in these cases, the qualified person makes a declaration, which is listed in the dossier of the marketing authorization, and they confirm that the active substance manufacturer is in compliance with GMP, and this is based on regular audits of the active substance manufacturing sites. And I'll talk more about the qualified person now. So this is a key role. The educational requirements are laid out in Directive 2001/83. A QP is required in order to obtain a MIA. This is for finished product manufacturers and importers, and they take responsibility for a number of things, but some of them are the GMP compliance of the finished product and active substance, as I've just mentioned, and also they ensure that the product complies with the marketing authorization. And for every batch that's released onto the market in the EU, a QP must certify and perform that release. And it's quite a responsible role, so EU member states have the authority to challenge a QP in court if they have failed to fulfil their obligations. So now you're wondering, we're talking about all these inspections, but how do I know if a site has been inspected and what was the outcome of this inspection? So we have a really good public database for this, which is UDRA DMDP. This is publicly available online. I have the link here at the end of the slide, and it contains a large amount of information. Some examples are manufacturing and importation authorizations, GMP certificates, and also statements of non-compliance. So sites that were found to be non-compliant with GMP, they're also listed on this publicly available website. And this information is really accurate. It's regularly updated by the EU national competent authorities. They have 90 days, which is a legal requirement, to upload a GMP certificate following an inspection. And also, they can be contacted if you have any questions about a GMP certificate. So generally at the end of the certificate, they will have the contact details for the competent authority who issued it. And this allows you to verify the GMP status of manufacturing sites. And it also is another way that we facilitate international collaboration. So also international regulators or trusted authorities, they also have access to this UDRA DMDP. And they can also see additional information relating to planning of inspections. We can share information planning. And this helps to reduce duplication of inspections. This is something we're hoping to develop going forward. So now this is just a screenshot from the UDRA DMDP website. I won't focus too much on it in the interest of time. So now, what is the role of EMA in all of this? So the agency has a coordinating role for GMP inspections of manufacturing sites for centrally authorised products. So just to let you know, it's a common misconception that EMA does not have an inspectorate. Instead, we nominate national competent authorities inspectorates to perform inspections on our behalf. But we have a key role on ensuring common interpretation of EU GMP and related issues. And we also develop EU-wide procedures on GMP inspections and related activities. And these two activities are generally facilitated through the GMDP Inspectors Working Group, which I've just discussed. So this is a good forum to ensure that all member states can have an input into harmonising the guidelines. So EMA also facilitates cooperation between member states for inspections, manufacturers in third countries. They develop and maintain the UDRA GMDP database, as I've just mentioned, and we also coordinate the sampling and testing plan for centrally authorised products. So every year, as you may know, a number of centrally authorised products are chosen and they are tested to ensure that they comply with the specifications in their marketing authorisation. And also the EMA coordinates actions at EU level for quality defects for CAPs. So now, international collaboration, as I've mentioned, is a really important role in GMP supervision. So what we're doing at the moment is we're trying to share information with other international regulators, other trusted authorities, to ensure that we can broaden inspection coverage, focus our inspections on sites of highest risk, and minimise duplication of inspection resources. So how do we do this? One of the main ways we do this is through mutual recognition agreements. So these are basically a trade agreement where basically you're given the legal authority to recognise inspections performed by another party. So the EMA already has 7 mutual recognition agreements in operation. So there's one with Australia, Canada, Israel we have the ACAA with, there's Japan, New Zealand, Switzerland, and the newly signed mutual recognition agreement with the US FDA. So of course there are many benefits to this collaboration. It avoids duplication of inspections. It also allows industry to benefit from the waiving of importation or retesting on importation, encourages international harmonisation, use of resources, and also allows, as I said, to focus on sites which may have the highest risk no matter where they are located. So this collaboration and recognition uses things such as manufacturing authorization, inspection outcomes, sharing of inspection reports, and also recognising the testing that was done in other countries to waive batch control testing on importation. So as the US MRA was signed recently, I said I would just give a short description of this. So as you may be aware, it entered into force in the 1st of November 2017 after a number of hard years' work on both sides, and also with the European Commission and the member states. So back in the 1st of July 2017, EU was completed its assessment of the FDA, and they found them to be equivalent with the EU. On 1st of November, I said, it entered into force, and the FDA recognised 8 member states as being capable for GMP inspections. And now just last week, on the 1st of March 2018, the FDA has recognised 4 additional member states as being capable. So this is really good news going towards 15th of July 2019. We're on track to have all EU member states recognised, the waiving of batch control testing and importation, and also a decision on the inclusion of veterinary medicines to be included in the scope of the MRA. And then going towards the 15th of July 2022, it's hoped to broaden the scope of the MRA to include other products such as vaccines and blood-derived products as well. So now, I'm afraid I don't have a whole lot of time left to go through quality defects, but one thing I would like to highlight is the rapid alert system. So this is a really valuable tool for sharing information and allows us to transmit information when urgent action is required in order to protect public or animal health. So this may include cases such as recall of defective or falsified products, draft statements of non-compliance, and so on. And this information is then circulated to member states, different MRA partners who I've mentioned, PICS, the Commission, and international organisations. This is a really useful way to share information really quickly in urgent cases. And the details are published in the compilation of community procedures. I have a link there, and I also have a link at the end of my presentation to a lot of other resources which are publicly available. So if you'd like some more information, they're there. But that's all from my presentation. But if you have any questions now, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Elaine. So, because then we will come GCP and pharmacovigilance, perhaps it's a little bit a different area. I propose that we break in the sense of having around 15 minutes for questions on GMP and GMP inspections.
I think you're getting tired a little bit, or you've exhausted all your questions. No, we have one question. Yes.
Yes, please.
Hi, Jason Bauer from Murray Stopes International. I was just wondering, if a GMP inspection is mutually recognised through that agreement, would that certificate or anything be published on the UDRA GMP website?
So yeah, all inspections that are performed by EU authorities, following this within 90 days, the National Competent Authority issues a GMP certificate. And generally, most of the MRA partners also issue GMP certificates. They're not normally published on UDRA GMDP though. So we share those between ourselves. And yeah, I suppose they're not published on UDRA GMDP.
And certain authorities, certain international authorities don't have, with whom we have MRAs, don't have such GMP certificates. This is the case, for instance, of the FDA in the US. So we use other type of documents to rely and recognize.
The final aim of this process of reliance on other is we need to have built the trust, but we also need to have a confidentiality arrangement so we can exchange information on inspection, because this is considered, because it relates to trade secret manufacturing processes. It's quite sensitive and confidential. So we need the confidential. So for example, for the MRA with the US, we had to, in addition to having the capability assessment of each member state, also having the member state signing a confidentiality arrangement, a special one, an additional one with the FDA in order to be able to exchange trade secret, which we call the super CC, the super confidentiality commitment, and to make sure that we protect the trade secret that are exchanged in this. But the final aim is to rely on the other one to do the work. So not to do duplicate work, not to do together, just to say, you've done it, it's good enough for us. You tell us it's compliant, we just don't check it, we trust you. So the EU system is relatively simple because we have this certificate. When you don't have a certificate, you need to, so for the time being, we sometimes exchange inspection reports, but the aim is not to exchange any more inspection reports because we trust the outcome.
Peter, yeah?
It went pretty fast, so I'm not sure that I got everything. For the the agreement with the US FDA for vaccines, it will start in 2022.
So yeah, the decision to include vaccines in the agreement or not is going to be taken in July 2022. So I suppose they're going to work on experience built up and trust gained throughout the previous years and maybe joint inspections performed on these kinds of manufacturing sites, and then they will make a decision jointly whether to include them or not in the scope.
No, a decision is not taken, so it will still to be, the decision can still yet to be, no, they will not be included as part of the agreement. So. And there are a number of other products that are not covered by the agreement. So, for instance, ATMPs are not covered, human plasma products. So, and there are others that will be still considered for, so some of them will be considered by the 15th of July 19, and this is the case for the vet products. Others, like the plasma and vaccines, will be, a decision needs to be made by July 2022.
And for example, while we have a mutual recognition agreement with Japan for a longer time, we're still increasing the scope. So currently we're waiting for a new step in the scope to involve, if I'm not mistaken, injectable product in the MRA. So we build so I would say the higher risk product comes second in the process. That's why we have this progression over time.
Yes, please.
Fabrizio De Ponti, University of Bologna. I was wondering, one important question might regard the mutual recognition from sites or outside the European Union. For instance, when you approve generic medicinal products, a mutual recognition of sites outside the European Union might provide a challenge for this system. Just a question.
Actually, on this one, it's an interesting one because the current legislation in Europe requires that the the manufacturing site. That's okay. No, that's okay. Sorry, I'm going to say something completely different.
Again, it depends on the scope of the mutual recognition agreements we do have. Some of them cover inspections also in third country territories, others not. For the US, it covers everything. So, but it depends on the agreement we do have. But as Agnes was saying, it's a question of trust. Once you trust, I mean, it doesn't matter if you are going to inspect the site, you know, if FDA goes to inspect the site in the US or it goes to inspect the site in India, because you trust their system and they trust our system. So at the end, it doesn't really make a difference, but it's true that not all mutual recognition agreements the EU does have include inspections or mutual recognition inspections of third territories. Yeah.
Thank you. So, if I understood correctly, from now on, the inspection, for example, of one site in China, done by the FDA inspectorate, will be mutually recognized by the EU. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Just one more. Can you explain what the nature of the mutual recognition status is between the EMA and PICS members?
That's not a mutual recognition agreement as such.
Yeah.
PICS, it's a different structure. And we are part of PICS. We collaborate. We participate in a number of activities because, of course, the objectives are quite similar. So, for instance, in terms of training, we do common trainings, so we contribute to the trainings they provided in the area of GMP. For certain documents, we also work together with them. So through our GMDP inspection working group, we contribute actively, but it's not a mutual recognition agreement. It's a different type of. Yeah.
No, maybe if I can complement the answer. For PICS, it's not a mutual recognition agreement. There are so many countries, but we use the results of inspections carried out by PICS, by other PICS participating authorities for on a risk-based approach on frequency of inspection of manufacturing sites. So if they have been inspected by, well, there are also other parameters, of course, but one of the parameters used to define the frequency of inspection is on a risk-based approach is if there has been an inspection from a PICS participating authority.
And it's a genuine question, but that means because PICS members meet certain standard criteria. So although we don't have a mutual recognition agreement, we know that they are actually at a certain level of inspection. That's why we can use the result or consider what they have been doing, even if it does not substitute. It gives us reassurance that someone with the same level standards has been inspecting.
The thing is that to become a PICS participating authority, the process is quite complicated and involves assessment from the current members. So once an authority is accepted, this means that its inspection system has been basically assessed and found equivalent or good enough to be a PICS participating authority.
Yes, please.
Sorry, another question. What's the exact difference between the US-EU mutual recognition agreement and the other MRAs as regards GMP inspections? Thank you.
So I suppose the thing is to go back to that each MRA is a trade agreement firstly, and then they might have an annex, say, on GMP inspections or recognition of inspections. So, and they were all written and agreed at different points in time. So they all have different scopes and different applicabilities. And I suppose it's not quite, they're not all identical at all. So different products are included in scopes at different time points. And yeah, it's not, they're not equivalent between the MRAs.
I mean, in our website, we have for each of the MRAs, we have a table, a summary table that includes really like which products are covered, when was it signed, or what was the last update, and what concerned the update. So just as Agnes said, recently the one with PMDA has been updated to extend the coverage of the products covered. So it's quite, in our website, you can find all this information for each of the MRAs we have. Any other questions? I mean, probably after the presentations on GCP and pharmacovigilance, we can still have, we'll have some time, so we can still have additional questions if you wish to. So then, thank you very much, Elaine. And we'll pass now for GCP. And we have with us my colleague, Sofia Milona. She works in the clinical and non-clinical compliance. And she's going to present two presentations, so one on the GCP and then another one on the pharmacovigilance inspections. So, Sofia, thank you.
Hello, thank you, Anabela, and good afternoon to everyone. Now, apologies because I may not read in detail all the slides, but please feel free to ask clarifications and ask questions at the end. This is only in the interest of time and to be sure we have enough time for discussion. So, the first one will give you an overview on GCP, good clinical practice, and GLP, good laboratory practice inspections, and more on the role of EMA. So I'm not planning to go in detail in this slide, but if you wanted to look for details in the EU legal framework, this would help you to know to which directive or regulation to go looking in Udralex, because everything is published there. And also in this slide, I'm sure you are aware that the current legal framework is changing, will change in the future, and we will have the two directives, the clinical trials directive, we call it, and the GCP directive repealed by the new clinical trials regulation. I think you had a session dedicated on that, so I won't go into detail, but this is important for us and is strengthening, we think, the legal framework. I would also like to mention, and I think it's important that in the legislation we have a legal basis and references. So we do have the definition of inspection, and this applies to all kinds of inspections. We do have legal basis to conduct GCP inspections, and the legislation also gives more clear requirements for the member states to appoint inspectors. It describes the requirements for the inspection team, inspection procedures, and it also talks about the agency's role in the coordination of those inspections. Now, talking about the agency's role in GCP inspections, it's important to explain the difference between the inspections coordinated by EMA and then the inspections, the GCP inspections conducted at national level, the national inspections. So the inspections coordinated by EMA are really inspections of pivotal clinical trials that are part of the marketing authorization applications within the centralized procedure. And as you can imagine, these trials usually have been completed, and we have submitted a clinical study report, or at least an interim report with all the results. These are requested by the committees, so the Committee for Medicinal Products for Human Use, and they are conducted by EU inspectors on behalf of EMA, because EMA doesn't have its own inspectors. And these inspections have to follow the guidance as published at the EMA website in terms of inspection procedures and follow-up as well. Now, the national inspections, they can be also for trials that are completed, and this will be the case when they are part of a national marketing authorization application procedure. But these national inspections can also be in an ongoing trials, of course, because they can be part of the oversight of clinical trials conducted in the member states' territory. And in this case, they will be also part of their national programs. And of course, they are conducted by the member state inspector in its member state, and they follow the guidance and the procedures as published in UDRLEX Volume 10. This is important to understand always the difference and to understand that we have these two types of inspections conducted. Now, another important point to highlight is that the clinical trials, and actually the pivotal, I'm talking about the pivotal clinical trials submitted in the marketing authorizations dossiers to EMA, include patients that have been recruited from all over the world. And that's why it's important to always say we are looking in the global picture. And in this slide, actually, you can see from where the patients have been recruited in those pivotal trials for the period 2005-2016 in any marketing authorization application, line extension, or variation. And actually, in the next slide, you can see the numbers. Of course, it's not a surprise that the majority still comes from EU, and you have North America following up. But you can see in the rest of the world as well, we have quite high numbers from the area Middle East, Asia Pacific, and also Central and South America. So then let's go back to GCP inspection. So in all trials that are included in a dossier that is submitted in support of a marketing authorization application, they can be subject to a GCP inspection. But not all of them will be inspected at the end. This is only the potential. So we have two kinds of inspections that are requested by the committees for this type of trials. We have the routine ones, and these are part of a routine surveillance program that we coordinate, but it has been agreed together with the committee and the inspectors. And this follows certain criteria. I will explain more later. And then you have the trigger inspections, of course, when there are concerns by the assessors or there are specific questions to be answered for the application. Now, actually, I'm not going to explain too much now, but if you wanted to get more information on the criteria used for the selection of applications and then trials and sites, you should read this document, this points to consider document that explains, and you can follow the link. Now, as I said, we have routine and non-routine, the triggered inspections. And if you would like to see some statistics on the overall number of sites inspected by type of inspection, and this takes really a longer period, like 2000 to end of 2017, we have inspected in total 800 sites, and in that period, and you can see the numbers per year. And of course, it's obvious that the non-routine, the triggered ones, can vary because these are upon request. But you can see that we are trying to increase the routine ones, so we are sure we cover and we inspect a bigger sample of the trials we receive. And this is the equivalent map showing where we have inspected the areas that we have covered from inspection. And this actually gives you the numbers of GCP inspections coordinated by EMA, and its number of sites inspected by year and region. And of course, it's not a surprise that the majority of the inspections are always conducted where the majority of patients are recruited. So we have a higher number of inspections in EU and USA. But you can have a look and see how the numbers look for the rest of the world. Sorry, you can see it later. I won't go into detail. Now, once we have an inspection, the inspectors will give us an inspection report. And in order to understand the seriousness of the deficiencies, they will have to grade the findings. And here you can see the definitions. So if it is a critical finding, this means that they saw conditions, practices, or processes that adversely affect the rights, safety, or well-being of the subjects, or the quality and integrity of the data. And we say that this type of deficiencies are considered unacceptable. Now, major findings are also serious deficiencies, and they are usually direct violations of GCP principles. So we get the report, and we have the grading of each observation, of each finding. Now, in this next slide, you can see the top 10 critical findings and which areas usually these are given. And then you can see that the first two have to do with essential documents and source documentation, and the third one is in the area of monitoring. Of course, this is just to give you an idea because you cannot see the exact findings. But what is important is that once we have the report, you have to really understand what is the impact of those findings to the actual marketing authorization application. And this is, I think, the most difficult part of the story. So in order, and this is really has to be decided on a case by case. This document that I'm referring to is a document on points to consider on GCP inspection findings, and actually discusses examples of findings which are more likely to influence the benefit-risk evaluation, findings which may, and findings which are less likely. But the truth is that in each case, you have to really look the specific example and decide. So it's only to support this discussion. And the truth is that the possible consequences for this can really vary. You can have no problems at all, and you can have some findings, but the data are accepted. But you may have to do further inspections to really understand what happened and whether you can accept the data. Or we may have to reject a part of the data, even, let's say, for example, from a selected site, which will mean reanalysis. The applicant sponsor may need to make corrections or remonitoring, or even submit a corrected clinical study report. We may have, in some cases, to reject the whole trial. And this, of course, means delays in the evaluation procedure, and potentially can lead to rejection of the application. And in terms of corrective and preventive actions, you can understand that if the trial is completed, there is not much we can do for the data from the specific trials, trials. So, of course, CAPA is always requested, and it will help for future trials in a specific site, or future trials from a sponsor or CRO. But this is really more for the future. And we also look into that in the sense to re-inspect sponsors or sites when non-compliance was found, and we have new trials included in applications. But for the specific application, there's not much we can do. So just in the interest of time, and then we can discuss more on GCP, we can see on the GLP requirements. Actually, I want to say that GLP inspections are quite rare, and they will be only upon request, and you will understand why. Generally, the requirement is that any pivotal non-clinical studies that are submitted in marketing authorization applications or clinical trial applications, they have to be conducted or inspected by a country that has implemented the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, MAD system, the Mutual Acceptance of Data system. So this is the requirement. Now, studies that are conducted in a facility that are not part of a MAT adherent country may also be accepted if in the last 3 years they were subject of a full monitoring inspection from a monitoring authority of a country that is a signatory to the MAT agreement. So what happens really for all the pivotal GLP studies, we ask the sponsors and the applicants to submit information. And here you can see the information they have to submit on their studies. And then the most important one is really the test facilities, the sites, and really the GLP status. They have to comment and tell us the period that the facilities were used so we can see if they were part of accepted GLP monitoring program. And just to say, this information is checked at validation. If we see something that is not according to the requirements, any study and data coming from such a facility, this will be flagged. The rapporteurs, non-clinical assessors, and the GLP inspectors will discuss. And then it's really on a case by case to decide if we really need to conduct a GLP audit. And that's why it's not so common to have those inspections. So just to conclude, and I'm sure you have seen this before, we always like to highlight the goal of those inspections, which is really to protect the rights, integrity, and well-being of the patients, help each other, build expertise, learn from the findings, avoid repetition of those mistakes, reduce duplication of effort, fill the gaps in the global network, and then ensure quality of non-clinical and clinical data. And actually, the last one is very important, to ensure that the decisions to authorize and use medicinal products are really based on robust clinical and non-clinical data. So thank you very much. I'll pause, or should we go to the next?
No. Thank you very much, Sophia. So we thought that perhaps we'll get some questions from GCP side that probably the majority of you will have greater interest and then the pharmacovigilance ones. I just wanted to add 2 points in relation to what Sophia said. So we didn't mention specifically in the presentation in terms of international collaboration, but we also have some initiatives. Of course, these are not mutual recognition agreements because here it's a different principle. You can, for a manufacturing site, it's easy. Yeah, it's compliant or non-compliant. It needs to have an authorization. But for GCP, we don't have that concept of certificate. So we can't really have mutual recognition agreements, but we have a number of initiatives with international authorities, namely with the FDA. We have the MEA, FDA GCP initiative also with PMDA, with Japan, and we have also a similar one with FDA for bioequivalence trials. And this also helps us, it's the same principle as Elaine showed for GMP. It's really to avoid, as you can see, we can go and inspect all trials. It's mission impossible, not us, not any authority in the world. So we use, for instance, if an application is submitted to the MEA and then we know we have regular contacts with FDA, we have regular teleconference. If we know that the FDA has already inspected that pivotal trial and went to that site or to that sponsor, then we take it into account in our risk-based approach in the decision to go or not to that site. And probably, yeah, if we know, we'll consider or not consider to go. So that's one aspect that I wanted to mention. And the other one is just, as for GMP, and Elaine mentioned it, we also have a GCP inspection working group. And this GCP inspection working group is composed by representatives from all member states, and it has a key role in terms of development of procedures, guidelines. So it's another area that we coordinate. And in fact, the MEA is sharing this group. So just these 2 points before I pass to the questions. Any questions then? Peter?
As far as I'm concerned, most of the GCP inspections are post hoc. Do you have inspections during the trial? And do you envisage to start, as is done in other regions in the world, to do inspections during a trial, which could have a much greater impact on the quality of the trial?
Yes, thanks for this question. Now, at the moment, we don't request in terms of the EMA program, let's say, but the member states that have trials in their territories, they do inspect. So for the EU trials, we do have inspections during when the trial is ongoing. But now for EMA, it can happen that you have an interim report, and I think this is quite more the trend now, that you have an interim report from the first phase of the trial, and the trial is ongoing, and then if you request an inspection for this trial, the truth is that the trial is ongoing. So in that sense, we do have examples, and it's happening more and more, that the trials that we inspect is ongoing, but I think is in a different way from what you said, because this would be to target the trials that we know they will come. But we do inspect ongoing trials, but in the cases that I explained.
Do you have figures on the numbers of ongoing inspections? On inspections on ongoing trials?
No, not at the moment. This we could have if we look into, because we know when they are ongoing. But what I know only, but I cannot give you numbers, is that the numbers are increasing the last few years. So we do have more often inspections in trials that you received an interim clinical study report, and then when you go and inspect, the trial is ongoing. But no, we haven't looked. It was not so common in the past, but now it's more, I think. Member state inspections, maybe there are statistics, at least indicative. But I was talking for our inspections.
It's something we can try to get through even the the GCP inspection working group. So it's something we can try to get. I would not say from all member states, because each time we ask this kind of thing, sometimes it's quite difficult to. But we can try for the future to have to do a survey or with the member states as part of the GCP inspection working group.
I think one point that is quite important to remember, that there are two aspects in GCP. One is the patient right and well-being, and the other one is data integrity, which are both important for us. But imagine a situation, artificial, unfortunately it doesn't happen, where there would be no informed consent, but all the rest would be done perfectly according to protocol and everything. So how would we judge of whether we take this data for the purpose of marketing authorization or not? If we don't take the data, if we reject the trial, we are recognizing that ethics is important, that autonomy of patient is important, and at the same time we are respecting the patient's right. But at the same time, we're losing the information to which the patient have contributed with their own body. And that is a very tricky question. It's a bit of a study case in a way, but it shows the difficulty of judging between the finding of the inspection and the impact on the benefit risk for marketing authorization, which I think is one of the trickiest. And we do not have an ethics committee at the agency, but we have to have an ethical approach to this data, and the balance is sometimes quite tricky.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Anne Mathilde Kvamme, Haukeland University Hospital, Norway. Are there any inspections or approval of the sponsors' data collection systems, like the ECRFs, to ensure GCP compliance and personal data protection regulation compliance? It has to do with trusting the data, and also how much a site like a university hospital can request of documentation from an international sponsor, a company, to ensure that the data is safe on their way.
No, this is a topic where the inspectors working group that Anabela mentioned is really looking very much into detail, and but there is not any system to certify or to say this system is fine, you can use, and then they are inspected in connection to a specific trial, and then if the trial is completed and the system was not good, unfortunately, then yes, we cannot do much. That's true. And this is an important point. I don't think they have discussed even to have, but they are, what the inspectors are discussing is to put more guidance outside and publish, even at least as a Q&A, more practical guidance, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and what are the common problems they see in inspections. But it's quite new area, and recently everything goes electronic. So, and you can even see that, I don't know if we had split the statistics for the top 10 critical findings, let's say by years, maybe we will see that this CRF, and I think it has to do with the ECRF, and maybe even the essential documents or source documentation have findings that are related to the fact that these systems couldn't then reconstruct the data or help inspectors to verify. So it is a big area, and there is discussion to really find the balance, because they welcome the...
If you at least can find some criteria that they can say that they fulfill or something, would
yeah,
make it easier
there
for
is
us to approve,
guidance, but I think they understand they need to give even more. There are some guidance. There is a document on the expectations on source. Yes, I'm not sure if we put it in the references. Actually, we can include it if you do a post mailing from this meeting. There is, but this describes key principles. Of course, if it is obvious to you how you comply with these key principles, you will be fine. But in some cases, maybe more guidance will be needed, and they are working on that.
Just to add what Sophie was saying, we are working from the side of the inspectors, but in fact, we have met already a few times with industry representatives, sponsor representatives, because we know this is really a top issue now. So also to understand what are they using, how they are moving to these new systems and so on. So in fact, the inspectors working group have met just recently, a couple of months ago, and the previous year as well. So it's a work that is being done in a sense with very close interaction with the concerned stakeholders, because it's a quite important topic. And there will be more guidance. The purpose of this is really to understand what are the difficulties, the needs from the side of the sponsors, and then from what inspectors, from the experience of the inspectors, what they find. And then the idea is really, as Sophia said, to put it in a guidance document that can be then useful for everyone.
I think we are back to the topic of innovation, where we have innovation coming to us and we need to be prepared. At the same time, you cannot regulate every single system, because then as soon as you've published your guideline, it's already outdated. Innovation goes faster than us producing guidelines, fortunately, probably. And so, sorry, this means that we need to look at the principle rather than the details, because otherwise we will regulate for something which is not anymore used. So we need to adapt to this system constantly. It's not just in terms of new product, but also in terms of collecting information. And this is irreversible. Nobody's going to go back to quill and parchment. So we need to work electronically and clinical trial, also because it brings, it facilitates follow-up of patient. They can answer from home rather than go to a visit. So this is facilitating a better follow-up. So we need to adapt, and we are maybe running a little bit behind, but we are running.
Yeah. We'll accept one last question, and then again, after we finish the pharmacovigilance presentation, we can still go back. Yes, please, on the back, yeah?
Hello, Patricia Carmona from Chile. The unique Latin American country present here. My English is not good, so I hope you can understand me. EMA can say all products authorized here have the same standard of GMP, yes? But what about the other products authorized in the European Union by the national competence authorities? I know it depends of each national authority, but is it possible to say all products authorized in European Union are the same standard in GMP, manufactured here or out Europe. And the second question is about GCP inspection. Does include the bioequivalence studies?
I'll answer the second one first. So yes, under GCP, we do include the bioequivalence trial. So if we went to a bioequivalence facility, this will be within the numbers and we keep the same statistics. Now, the truth is that the inspectors that go to those inspections are usually a bit more specialized. So if we are inspecting an application that has a bioequivalence pivotal trial, we have a different pool of inspectors because of the expertise, because it's true that these trials may need different expertise and need people that know what is important for a bioequivalence trial. But other than that, they have to be also according to GCP.
So we have now Elaine for GMP.
So relating to your question on GMP, so the national competent authorities inspect using the same standards of GMP no matter where the product is authorized. So if it's authorized here by the EMA as a centralized product, they will use the same kind of standards for their own products that are authorized on a national basis or those that go through the mutual recognition procedure. So the GMP standards remain the same and they will expect the same standards whether they're performing an inspection for either kind of product in the EU or outside the EU as well.
Just to complement, and how we guarantee that the standards are the same is because we have the same legislation that is applicable to all member states. We have same guidance. So Elaine in her presentation mentioned the community procedure. So the guidance is the same. We have the GMDP inspection working group that has representatives from all member states and that meets regularly. And when there are questions or inconsistencies that have been found, this is discussed and making sure that then guidance is improved or to make sure that everyone follows. And the last thing I would like to mention is that we have what we call a joint audit program, meaning that inspectorates of the member states are audited regularly at a certain frequency. And as part of these audits, all the procedures, how the member state produced the inspection report, the qualification of the inspectors, all aspects that are relevant to ensure that equivalence is kept are looked at during this joint audit. So that's the way we make sure that we are really following the same standards. Ricardo?
If I understood well your question, it was about also about new and old products, authorized products. There is no difference in the standard applied because every manufacturer is inspected, of the finished product is inspected regularly, normally every 3 years, but with a risk-based approach now. And there is no difference in approach for new products and old products. And the same stands for the active substances. There are different rules that have been explained before, but there is no difference in the approach for old and new products.
Okay, for the benefit of time, I think we'll move now to the pharmacovigilance inspections presentation. And then, hopefully we'll still have 5 minutes or a little bit more if you want to sacrifice a little bit of the break. No, I can see the chair doesn't want to. So let's go to the pharmacovigilance.
It's not that I don't want sacrifice. I just know that people have to leave because some people have flights and so on. So I don't want to delay anything because of that. But take the time.
Yes, let's carry on, and I'm confident you will have time. Yeah. So this now will focus on good vigilance practice inspections or pharmacovigilance inspections. So the first thing to highlight here is the EU pharmacovigilance requirements, and it's quite basic, but so forgive me if you already know everything. But I wanted to highlight that every marketing authorization holder in the EU that has at least one product on the market with a marketing authorization, actually, not on the market, a product with a marketing authorization, they have to have a pharmacovigilance system in place. And as part of this pharmacovigilance system, they have to have permanently and continuously their disposal, this is how it is worded, an appropriately qualified person for pharmacovigilance. This is what the one we call QPPV. And they have to reside and operate in the union. Now, the other thing they have to have in place, and this is the pharmacovigilance system master file that will describe the system that they put in place. And they also have to operate a risk management system for each of their medicinal products. And of course, there are other requirements, but I'm highlighting the main ones. And if you wanted to read more, I highlighted some articles from the legislation. So the other thing that is important to highlight, although it has been now some time, is that in 2012, the legislation around the new legislation that came in force strengthened actually pharmacovigilance. And in the area of inspections, the important parts are the ones in this slide. So we do have the introduction of the requirement for the pharmacovigilance system master file. And you can see the details, how this is defined. Now, we also have the concept of the supervisory authority for CAPs, for centrally authorized products. And this is very important because the supervisory authority is the member state where the marketing authorization holder declares the location of their pharmacovigilance system master file. So they are obliged to declare a location, a member state, where they will place the master file. And this should be either a site where they do important pharmacovigilance activities or the QPPV site. And this defines which is the member state that will be responsible for the supervision of this system. So it's very important for the inspections, for pharmacovigilance inspections. The other important thing with this new legislation is that we have now the possibility to conduct pre-authorization inspections, because generally the pharmacovigilance obligations will start with the marketing authorization being granted. But now we have the option, if we want, to request an inspection of the pharmacovigilance system that the applicant, future marketing authorization holder, tells us that they will put in place if we have concerns. And the last one is the cooperation in the coordination of third country inspection, which is really strengthened and has to involve and happen within with the agency involved. Now, if you wanted also more detailed information on the pharmacovigilance requirements, these are the documents where you should look for, the Commission Implementing Regulation and the GVP, the guidance. Now, going on the role of the EMA, and I hope by now you know very well that there are different ways to get a marketing authorization in EU. So the role of EMA is really focusing in the products and the systems that cover the products that got authorization through the centralized procedure. We do care very much also for the others, but this is the main role and responsibility of EMA. And so, knowing this, you will understand that the EU inspectors in the different member states conduct a variety of inspections of pharmacovigilance systems. And these systems may cover only nationally authorized products, but they may also cover a combination of centrally and nationally authorized products. And then this is really, and they are hoping they have to cover all the systems with all the products in the EU. Now, I wanted to say that the inspections that are requested by the committees, the Committee for Medicinal Products of Human Use, and actually also for veterinary use, because we have pharmacovigilance inspections for the systems for veterinary products. And the ones requested by the committees and coordinated directly, conducted, on behalf of EMA, they are very, very small fraction of the whole EU pharmacovigilance inspections. And I will explain this more later on. So this small percentage, these inspections will happen only when we have to inspect a site outside the EU. So if we have a global pharmacovigilance site in a non-EU country, usually this will be requested by the committee. Also because of the coordination of inspections in the third country inspections that I mentioned previously. Also, when we have joint inspections by the member states, usually this inspection we will coordinate. And the other very important one is when you have a for cause, a trigger inspection, this will have to come through the committees because they need to explain their questions and the reasons for the inspection. And this is when we also coordinate. So hopefully after this slide, everything will be clear. So as I said, this slide represents all the EU pharmacovigilance inspections. And this can be, we have a part of national inspections, as I said, and this is for systems that cover only nationally authorized products. And these the member states handle through their national programs. And these are usually routine programs because this is more like the GMP case. You expect that routinely they are inspected. And actually, the EMA program is a 4-yearly program. So we have defined this cycle. And this covers all, as I said, all the marketing authorization holders with at least one centrally authorized product. If they have one centrally authorized product, they are in this routine program and they will be inspected with frequency of 4 years. Of course, this is a risk-based program, so they may get an inspection in 1 or 2 years if there is a need. And it's not very usually is extended much, but it could be extended if they had a very good inspection. There are other priorities. And then, of course, you have the for-cause inspections. These need to happen and when they are requested to fulfill the purpose. And the majority, all of these make the EU inspection program. Now, the sites is a bit more obvious. So usually we go to the site of the PSMF location, which is usually the QPV location. Now, if a system has subcontractors or is very fragmented, it is likely they will get more than one inspection, or we will go to the most suitable site. But usually they are the first two. And now, I have to say, for all the type of inspections, we have an inspectors working group. So here I didn't forget, maybe because I'm more involved with that. We have the Pharmacovigilance Inspectors Working Group. The idea is the same. You have representatives from all the member states. They meet 4 times per year. And the purpose is really to discuss findings, prepare guidance and procedures, and also share experiences and views. Now, the other group that interacts very much with the Inspectors Working Group is the PRAC, and I'm sure you heard about it, is the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee. Now, the PRAC is involved in the routine program for inspections because it's risk-based and they can comment if they want an inspection to be conducted earlier. They also get involved and they can raise issues and concerns for the trigger inspections or even for the routines to guide the inspectors, to guide the scope of a routine inspection, where to focus. And of course, they get access to reports, all the EU inspection reports. And they also, we may also ask them to discuss when we have critical or major findings to agree on the follow-up and even any other action that needs to be taken, especially when we have to take product-specific actions. And you can see this is described in the union procedures. These are published on the website, and I'm not going to go in detail, but you should look if you wanted more information. Now here is just to say some metrics to see really the numbers, and the graph is really for this small part of inspections we conduct. And you can see the difference between the total number of EU inspections. If you look in 2016, I don't have the total number for 2017, otherwise I would give you, because this we collect from all the member states. So if you see 2016, we only coordinated 2. For the human medicinal products, there were a bit more for veterinary. And the total number of EU inspections, it was 217. So we do have a lot of inspections. And if there are problems, there we are also involved at EMA to follow up, to help the follow-up and the coordination of the actions. But we don't really request this through the committees. So just to say something also on the top, the most common findings. It's not a surprise. The most common one is on the adverse event reporting. And the next one is for quality management system. And this has been for a while, so probably will remain. And then lastly, I would like to highlight that for all types of inspections, but especially for pharmacovigilance, it's very important the sharing of information within the EU network. And that's why since 2012, we have taken actions and strengthened this communication. And the inspections, and they are really sharing routinely inspections planned and conducted, and this includes national and for MAAs, for CAPs, the scope of inspections, and also the outcome of the inspections, of course, so we can adjust the programs. And this is a lot of work, and we are trying to improve it all the time. So I think this is all for pharmacovigilance inspections, and you have a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for keeping strict to the time. So we still have 5 minutes for questions. I'll start if anyone has a question on pharmacovigilance, but if not, please feel free to ask on any GMP or GCP. Oh, yes, please.
Judith Padu, FDA. How does EMA coordinate release testing of pharmaceutical products that are from non-EU countries?
So release of products.
Yes.
From, I mean, if a product is manufactured outside the EU, then you need to have a site on the EU that is responsible for the importation, and so it needs. There is a control. It needs to be, yeah. So, and the batch release site will need to be always also in the EU, but it's a legal requirement. But if it comes from a third country, even needs to, there is importation tests that need to be done in a EU site.
Thank you.
Maybe while we were thinking about your next question, I made a small digression here. You've seen that the legislation said that the qualified person for pharmacovigilance needs to work and reside in the EU. That means that after Brexit, some people will have to move also from pharmaceutical industry because they are supposed to reside in the EU and the UK will not be. And we know that we have quite a high number of people, QPPVs in the UK currently. So that's another spin-off of the Brexit, and same for the master file on pharmacovigilance, which would be in the EU. So you see, our legislation has made it clear that a number of activities, including batch release and testing, or other activities, need to be in the EU. And if it was in the UK, it will be a problem unless the negotiation leads to something else, but no certainty at this point in time.
Yes, please.
Just a clarification about this last point. Can the marketing authorization holder delegate to a CRO the pharmacovigilance to avoid the...
Yes, they could. But then this would mean that the qualified person for pharmacovigilance would be in the CRO or would move. Yes, but they can do this for the pharmacovigilance system master file and for the QPPV, because it's happening now even without Brexit. So they can delegate. That's not a problem.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
In the previous discussion, you mentioned about pivotal non-clinical trials and some of the requirements in that. Could you explain a little bit more about what's involved in that, please?
The pivotal non-clinical. Yes, because this
right.
was in relation to the GLP requirements. So what happens is when we have, even in the pre-submission meeting, because usually we have with applicants pre-submission meetings, but for sure at the time of the validation of the dossier, there is a list of information that the applicants needs to give for every one of the pivotal trials, for the non-clinical trials. So they need to give the study number, all the information, and then I highlighted they need to say which were the facilities and the sites, the test facility, and then they need to comment on the GLP status of the facility. So, but and then within this, they need to say if this facility is in a country or it has been inspected by a country that is part of the OECD MAD acceptance data system. So it has to, this is one option. If they are not in one of those countries, it can be still okay, and we don't need an inspection if in the last 3 years, or they have been, this facility has had an accepted GLP monitoring inspection from a country. It depends if the country that has inspected is an EU or another country that adheres to the OECD MAT system. So if they had a full monitoring visit, this is what we are saying. Now, this, of course, is the requirement, is the principle, and it's described in the slide. Now, when this is not the case, and it could be for all the non-clinical trials or for one, then the rapporteurs, the non-clinical assessors, and the GLP inspectors will have to see the details and decide if they need to go for an audit. And it also depends if they want, because it depends also sometimes if they want a study-specific audit. So it may happen also that you had the full monitoring visit, and that can be accepted for the GLP compliance, but sometimes they may want to really go and have a study-specific audit, and then if this study was not included. Now, what has happened also in practice, just to say that usually we ask if somebody is planning to inspect within their monitoring system, their monitoring planning, and if an EU authority is going to go, and they know already because they have programs, we may include just the study. So, but it depends. We look all for the possibilities. That's why it's not so common to have GLP inspections.
Thank you,
Okay, sorry.
I'm not sure, so that question was not about what we call a pivotal non-clinical trial study. Was it also not about that?
Well, I wasn't entirely sure what the definition of a pivotal non-clinical trial was, but taking into account it's probably the final non-clinical trial. I was interested.
It's a bit unusual to call about pivotal. Normally, we reserve the word pivotal for clinical trials, which are in support of the phase 3 trial generally, or phase 2-3. What we may call pivotal are really the study supporting the mechanism of action and some of the regulatory requirements which are essential to the activity or safety of the product. But it's not really a common naming, I would say. And also to draw your attention to this very strange system where the GLP is working in a completely different environment because we refer to OECD, which we do not use for other type of studies. So we have a different legal framework in a way for the GLP, which is also quite confusing.
So opportunity for a last question. If not, okay.
Thank you very much. I was wondering whether your pharmacovigilance inspectors working group was open to observers from third countries, like your GCP inspectors working group, and how we could get into that as observers. Thank you.
Yes, we have observers, but this, I suppose, for new observers, there should be like an application, let's say, and then we will have to agree and decide. There should be confidentiality agreements or all the... But yes, we have observers in general.
The meetings are generally dealing with confidential information. So in that case, we cannot have observers to that part of the meeting. But there are other parts which are more general, or on guidance and other working methods. So in that case, observers are welcome. There are two options. Some can come in person to the meeting, and the other is to follow through a broadcast of our meetings. But please ask us first, because for resources issues as well, managing many observers is quite difficult, so we may have to prioritize. But if we can make it possible, we will try to make it possible.